Welcome to the Stop Faking Fine podcast, a show that will empower you to finally show up for yourself. It's time to stop faking fine. Dr. Ellen Reed, welcome to the Stop Faking Fine podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
I cannot, you guys, I cannot wait to have this conversation with Ellen. Like, we met on social media, and I have to just preface this story because we're both in the stress space and just trying to help people, just help everyone, ourselves included, show up better for ourselves on the daily. But we started talking in the DMs, right, on Instagram, and
yes.
you were like, oh my gosh, I wrote this book. I want to send you the book.
Yes.
And I was like, wait, we just met on the internet. You give out your address to strangers on the internet? I was like, do I give you my address? But long story short, I did. I am super grateful. Relentless Solution Focus is an amazing book, and I cannot wait to just chat about it. So welcome.
Love it.
And I'm just excited to talk more.
Love it. Well, thank you. Same.
Oh my gosh.
So that internet is a funny thing, isn't it?
It is. Honestly, it's my favorite. People have hard thoughts about Instagram and all the things, but I have created a wealth of true friendships, yourself included, from the power of social media and just meeting people. And I love that in your book, you talk about that we are wired to focus on the negative. We're wired to focus on the problem. And I mean, that's so true. And you guys teach a method of that. The problem isn't actually the problem, right?
Yeah, right. Right.
So what is the problem then, Dr. Reed?
And here's the thing is that, and you know this, you talk about this all the time, problems are a guarantee in life, you know? And I'm a mom. I've got two little boys, they're 8 and 5. And it's you know this, you know that, you're going to experience adversity and problems, but especially as a mom, I mean, they just come at you hard and fast, And so we, again, like you said, we're wired to focus on problems, and for good reason, right? If you go back to kind of our evolution, it was really important that we were very quickly able to focus on, the bear running at us through the woods or the poisonous berries on the bush. It's called problem-centric thought. We're wired with this problem-centric thought where our brains want to go to the problem, or our mistakes or our shortcomings or kind of what we're lacking in life, first and foremost. And so while that was very important to our survival as a species, now we live in a time where we don't have the saber-toothed tigers, right? We live in a time where our environments are much more stable, our resources are much more plentiful, and this problem-centric thought really just leaves us with these incredibly high levels of stress and anxiety, and it causes us to underperform. And that's why I was kind of thinking about and just prepping for this, or kind of seeing this podcast coming up on my calendar. I love the name of Faking Fine, right?
Yeah.
It's and I was thinking about this with myself because I was always the quintessential perfectionist high achiever. I lived most of my life through this, through college. I was A+ student. I had every club, packed my after school hours.
And you're a professional dancer.
Yes. So I retired about a year and a half ago, but I was with a professional company for 11 seasons. And then I did years of, professional work before this company existed. But I was always just okay, what's next? What else can I do? What's more? What's the best? I'll do that. Right. And that's just how I was wired. And a lot of us are wired like that. And I think, so many people relate to that kind of perfectionist, high achiever mentality. But that coupled with that problem-centric thought where we're really good at knowing where we're falling short. And really good at shrugging off what we do well. It's just a recipe for stress and underperformance. And so I'll give you a little bit more of a background and kind of how this kind of comes into what I do now. I just happen to be really lucky. I was always interested in psychology. I have my doctorate in psychology, experimental psychology with an emphasis on memory and cognition. So I'm really a researcher by training.
Yeah, what is experimental psychology? So like for those of us that don't understand this world, what is that?
Yes. So it's the research side of it, right? It's
Okay.
like it's the research side of it, like conducting the studies, doing the research to develop the strategies and tools and methods that we then go send out into the real world, right?
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's why you and I are such like good friends, because I'm a nerd. I love the data.
Yes.
I love the science.
Yeah.
I need the facts. Like I need the facts in order. And maybe it's the high performance part of me. Maybe it's the like overachieving part of me. I feel like you and I are so centric on all of the underlying things. So how did you...
Well, I was just going to say, that's one of the things that I love about what you put out there and what you do is that it is based on the science. And you got to be careful, you know, because especially on social media, you know, there's just so much out there that's not based on the research, that's not based on the science. I mean, you can scroll through Instagram for 15 seconds and get 30 different like tips and hacks and tricks, but nothing happens unless you implement it, right? And so one of the things that I think makes what we do so successful is that we know the science behind how to implement this stuff in a way that actually sticks. When I say we, my colleague, Dr. Jason Selk, he is the co-author on the book, Relentless Solution Focus. When I say that I was really lucky early in my career, I was really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. Meeting Dr. Jason Selk. So we talked about my dance background. He, at this time in his career, this was probably like 18 years ago now, he was just about to start as the director of sports psychology for the St. Louis Cardinals. And he volunteered on the weekends at a gymnastics center coaching the boys team. And I was the dance instructor there, kind of getting ready to start graduate school again. I was like, you know, I had like 5 jobs. Why not?
Yeah.
It was something I could add to my resume. I was like, sure, I'll do
But
it.
this is what the thing is, like juggling all of the things. It's not about doing less to have less stress. It's about managing that stress better so that you can be the dance instructor, be in grad school, be in all of the things. I love it.
Right. Well, and so I started working with him. He was at this time, you know, again, he was about to start as a director of sports psychology. So he's like, okay, my career really is about to kind of skyrocket, and he needed somebody to help with the administrative stuff. So I used to like make his confirmation calls and do invoices while I was working my way through graduate school. And so I really was very lucky to have a front row seat to these fundamentals and tools, really being implemented and working at the highest level right away. And then at the same time, this is probably the most, the luckiest part of it all is that I was able to apply them to myself. My own perfectionist mentality and dance career. And then at the same time, I was in graduate school, totally immersed in the research. So again, I credit the fact that I am where I am today, to that, you know, that lucky kind of chance meeting of my colleague and, you know,
and applying the principles. And you were sharing, or you've shared before, that as he was with the Cardinals, they won the World Series. Like they applied his principles and changed their mental focus to the Relentless Solutions Focus method and won the World Series. Like, I'm dying to unpack all of the things that you've learned and just all of it.
Well, and I mean, talk about amazing. Yes, he started with them in 2006, and they went on that year to win the World Series for the first time in over like 20 years.
Yeah.
And then while he was still with the team, they went on to win another one 5 years later. So
which is just amazing.
When I say this stuff works at the highest level, stuff works at the highest level. And so we kind of talked about this before. Like, I'm going to make sure that everybody listening to this leaves with something tangible and concrete, right? I always say, like, a pep talk is great, but it doesn't do anything to change your life.
No, you know? I want to break this down, and I know everyone else wants to break this down also. There's a couple different points in the book where there's one example in one of the very early chapters that they talk about a woman named Kai, in that I think it was Jason was talking about her, and that she was relentlessly optimistic, like with all of the struggles that she was having, relentlessly optimistic. And I personally felt that. I mean, I watched my husband take his last breath. Like I was in the hospital for 6 weeks, but I was relentlessly optimistic. I was like, we're going to do it. Like this can happen. I'm going to research the next best thing. We're going to get on cannabis. We're going to do all of these like crazy things. And I'm going to heal you. But I didn't have the tools that you're talking about to apply to myself mentally. So when I got out of that situation where it was like, okay, well, that didn't turn out as planned, but I've been living in fight or flight because I've had this saber-toothed tiger on my back for the last 6 weeks. Now I've walked out of the hospital and I still feel like I have the saber-toothed tiger on my back and I can't get it off. Like, I don't know how to get it off. So like, you guys teach a method. Like, tell me more about the method that we can apply to teach.
Yes. So let me kind of talk about optimism for a second. Because optimism has been very extensively studied and researched. And we talk about relentless solution focus, which the definition of relentless solution focus is just the mind's ability to stay focused on solutions, especially in the face of adversity. Essentially, it's optimism. Relentless solution focus is just a fancy word for optimism. And what makes it a little bit distinct, though, is that it's a concrete way of teaching and learning optimism. But optimism, again, has been very extensively studied. And the research is very clear that people with higher levels of optimism, they're happier, they're healthier, they have better, longer lasting friendships, they sleep better, and the list goes on. And here's the kicker, that this one I feel like is just almost unbelievable, that people with optimism live on average up to 14 years longer than those who don't.
That's like a mind-blowing fact.
It's mind-blowing.
14 years.
Yeah. And then within that 14 years, they're happier, they're more successful. So, and you talk a lot about cortisol. And the reason, this is a very biological, chemical thing. When our brains are focused on a problem, right, which again, we're wired to do, problem-centric thought, that sends a signal from our brain to our bodies to release cortisol, the stress hormone. Now, at certain levels, cortisol is important, right? It's important to our bodily functions and motivations and things like that. But even at moderately higher doses, this stuff is like low dose poison, right? Coursing through our veins. Yes. And I lived, I don't know if I would say half my life to this point, but I lived, up until kind of graduate school with low dose poison coursing through my veins all the time. And so many of us, most of us are just walking around with these higher levels of cortisol because of our tendency, the way we're wired, to focus on problems. And
the problem is like your perfectionism, like you're focused on like being perfect in every little thing. And in the book, when you first started to talk about PCT, and at first I was like, what is PCT? So I love that you've explained that. Like this woman, Kai, I loved her story because she also talked about other people saying like, I don't even know how you do it. Like, I don't even know how you do it. And on the surface, that seems supportive. Like, cool. Right. But what people are saying is like, oh my gosh, it would suck to be in your situation. I can't imagine like living your life. And you're like, yes. Well,
and so Kai, yes, exactly. Well, and Kai, I love this story. She is actually, her sister is a dancer friend of mine. And I've been following her story, her journey, kind of a couple years before we were writing the book. Her son was born with a rare kidney disorder. And so her entire pregnancy, was kind of a little bit different than most people's, right? Like learning how to kind of navigate this in her life, their life for several years was like full-time, dealing with this. And one of the things that I love about her story is that she talked about being kind of relentlessly optimistic, which is an amazing thing. Like she is very abnormal in the way that she has these kind of like high levels of optimism, which she really will say. And I've, talked to people who know her, like she was incredible through this whole process. She was the abnormal one right? And the best way, being able to just keep that focus on, all right, what's the next solution? What's the next solution? What's one thing we can do to make this better?
She's applying these principles, right?
Yes.
She's like, the takeaway for me from that was that, yes, she's optimistic. Yes, I was optimistic, and I still am an eternal optimist. Yeah. But we all need better tools to stay in the solution, because very quickly we can have days, moments that turn into weeks, that turn into months, where you're focused on the problem and you're spiraling downward. Yes. So
how do you do that, right? Yeah. How do you become more optimistic? Because again, the research is really clear. The benefits of optimism are huge. And we all probably know that. Like, that's not probably anything new to people. Like, we know it's good to be optimistic, but we just haven't been taught how to do that. And so, I always like to bring it back to the science and the research, because I need people to understand, like you're saying, like, we need to understand why it's important that we're wanting you to do this, right? Yeah. And so recognizing our problems is a really important step. Recognizing our focus on problems is a really important step. And that's why I kind of love that title of Faking Fine, because for me growing up, it was like, I just felt fine. Like, that was normal for me. My, like, having high levels of stress and anxiety was just kind of my normal. Like, I would wake up every morning before my eyes would even open. Like, that first, like, glimmer of your awareness and awakeness. And my heart would just start pounding. Like, pounding out of my chest. And that was just normal. Yeah. And so step one, we kind of break this down into 3 steps in the book. Step 1 to developing this relentless solution focus is just turning on your radar to be able to recognize when your focus is on problems. And so here's how you do it. We've all been given this fail-safe clue of when our brain is focused on a problem, and that's our negative emotion. Yeah. Anytime.
So when you start being negative Nelly, like, make sure that that's step 1. You turn that on in your brain.
Exactly. And we feel it, right? We feel it. We don't feel, here's the thing with the way our bodies and our brains work. We don't feel anything unless our brain is telling us to. So anytime you feel stress, worry, anger, guilt, depression, anytime we're feeling any of those negative emotions, that's a sure sign that your focus on some level is on a problem, or on what you can't control, or on something that could potentially go wrong. Okay. So first, being able to recognize it is so important. Here's the thing about stress that's really kind of scary, I think, in our society, is that we think of stress as this thing that just sort of lives with us. It's just like, it kind of just lives there. It's just there. Right? Like, oh, this week is going to be stressful, or it's just stressful being a mom. Parenting is just stressful. Moms just worry, right? We just think of it as this given that lives aside, like, next to us. When really our stress has been given to us to alert us when we're in need of a change.
Oh, that's so good. That is so good. To alert us to when we need a change. But we don't make the change.
Right. Or we don't even recognize that we're in need of a change because it just feels so normal to us. I understand. I lived my life like that every day. Felt like because like
misery loves company, right? So if you start start talking about, like, oh my gosh, you had to drive from daycare to this to that, I've been in the car for 3 hours and yada yada, and now I'm coming in with, like, oh my gosh, girlfriend, me too, yada yada yada. Let's talk. Totally. So how do we get out of that? What's step 2?
Okay. So step 1, recognize. Step 2, replace. Now here's the thing. Okay. The only way to turn our focus away from our problems is to replace that thinking with something else. Now, we can replace our thinking about problems. Well, let me back up. Here's why, though, it's bad to think about problems. Because when that cortisol is released, right, which is a guarantee when we're focused on problems, we literally become dumber. Cortisol significantly limits our intelligence. It significantly limits our creativity, and it makes us feel like garbage. So we literally become dumber and less able to do something about the problem that we're thinking about to begin with.
Less energetic, less focused, all of the things, because when you feel lousy, you spiral.
Yes, exactly.
Right? You mentioned this in the book also, when you cross over, and this I love this. When you cross the line from the to the solution side, from the
Yes.
problem side to the solution side, you actually release dopamine
Yes.
and norepinephrine, which are
Yes.
our happy and energizing
Yes.
hormones. And
Yes.
that's just all in your brain.
Yep. Yes. And this is why those statistics on like optimism, right, are so amazing and so incredible. And so, it literally affects our health.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you're exactly right. Like, it's a spiral, right? Here's the thing. There's a theory in psychology. I think this one's really important for people to understand. It's called expectancy theory.
Yep.
Expectancy theory states that which you focus on expands.
Mm-hmm.
So the more we're focused on our problems,
the bigger
the worse our problems become. Yes. The worse we feel about them.
Yes.
And again, it goes back to the chemicals, because we become worse at being able to deal with the problems or come up with solutions. So the name of the game is we've got to get from our problem. Like, if you think about our brain and we drew a line in the middle of our brain, we would have a problem side and we would have a solution side. Now, that's not really what our brain looks like, but let's just pretend there's like a mental chalkboard inside our brains.
Yeah, that's what you talk about in the book too. So is this the mental chalkboard that you're explaining?
Chalkboard.
I love it.
Yes. So we've got a problem side, and let's say it's on the left, and we're really good about being experts on our problems. Like, our problem side of that mental chalkboard is all filled in. Like, we're using really small font, really small print, and it's all filled in. We're really good about being over here. But again, when you're over here on that problem side, your brain is releasing cortisol. Mm-hmm. You're feeling worse and worse and worse, and your problems are becoming bigger. Mm-hmm. And so the name of the game is to recognize when you're over there. Mm-hmm. And then we've got to get from that problem side to the solution side. Okay, so now everybody out there is probably just thinking like, all right, I get it, Ellen.
I'm like, come on. I'm on the edge of my chair. I'm on the edge of my chair. I'm like, tell me, what can I do?
Right. I'll just try to stop thinking about so much of my problems, and I'll try to start being more positive. The problem is we can't do that. We cannot just tell ourselves not to think about something. You can't just tell yourself, just let it go, or just stop thinking about it, or just don't worry about it, right? Like, we've all tried that. It doesn't work. We try it with our kids, right? Coaches try it with their players, like, just let it go, shake it off. Doesn't work.
Shake it off. Yeah. That's my favorite phrase. Yeah. Oh my gosh. My husband, my first husband, used to say, suck it up, Dana, suck it up. Yeah. Like, when I wasn't managing things, that was his phrase. And I literally wanted to punch him. I was like, what up? Like, I am trying to explain. Yes. Now I understand by talking with you. Like, I'm trying to explain that I'm on the problem side of the chalkboard. And I'm trying to talk through how to get to the solution side of the chalkboard. Yes. And I'm a very audible learner, thinker. Like, I need to talk through things. So as I'm talking through it, I'm like, I'm actually asking you for help to get to the solution side, and telling me to suck it up is not helpful. Yes. Like, what do I do with that?
Yes. And I'm going to give you the exact tool to use to get from that problem side to the solution side. And before I give it to you, let me keep you on the edge of your seat for just another second. Before I give it to you,
I'm right here.
Here's why. Here's why you can't just say, well, just let it go, right?
Yeah.
It's because our brains can only fully focus on one thing at a time. Mm-hmm. So telling yourself not to think about something is just like telling you, well, just don't think about a pink elephant. Just let it go. Right. Just don't think about that pink elephant. Whatever you do, just don't think about that pink elephant.
And now all you're thinking about is the pink elephant.
All you're thinking about is the pink elephant. And so because of that, and here's the other thing. Remember, we can only focus on one thing at a time. Mm-hmm. So when we're thinking about our problems, guess what we're not thinking about?
The solution.
The solution. And so this is where the replace piece comes in. So step 1, recognize. Step 2, replace. And here's how you're going to replace it. Here's the how, okay? Again, we can't just say, let it go, don't think about it. Here's the tool that you're going to use to get from that problem side to the solution side. So everybody listening to this, write this question down. And the wording of this is really important. You're going to ask yourself this question. We call this the Relentless Solution Focus question. The question is, what is one thing I can do that could make this better?
I love that.
One thing I can do that could make this better. Now, here's a couple guidelines with this question. It's very simple. And the beauty of it is the simplicity. Like, we don't need to complicate this thing. In fact, people love to complicate success and happiness. Success and happiness are very simple.
Right. Well, because if you complicate it, it keeps you on the problem side. And that's the easiest place to be, is on the problem side.
I love the way you just said that. It's the easiest place to be. It's the most normal place to be. So let's break down that question a little bit. What's one thing I can do that could make this better? We don't need to get to the answer. We don't need to get to the thing that's going to solve the world's problems.
We need to start one thing.
Yes, exactly. We need to redefine the way that we think about solutions as just a plus one to our current situation. We call this the plus one concept. We need to redefine the way we think about solutions. It's like, I just need to make my situation 1 inch better, even if it's the way I'm dealing with that situation. Plus one. What's one thing I can do, right? Because we get so stuck with, it's called the entirety perspective, trying to solve the entirety of our problem. But that's overwhelming. When you're thinking about the whole mountain, right, you prevent yourself from taking that first step.
Yes.
And so when we think about what's that next 1 inch I can take, what's one thing I can do that could help make this better, we don't even have to get the right answer. Right?
I love that.
Remember, the name of the game, if you go back to that mental chalkboard, really, and here's where we talked about Kai and like what the real problem is. The real problem is that we live on the problem side of the chalkboard. And our cortisol is skyrocketing, and then we become less able to do anything about our problems. We become miserable, we become stressed, we become unhealthy. That's the real problem. So the name of the game is not solving our problems. The name of the game is to get onto that solution side of the chalkboard and to live over there as much as we can on the optimistic side, the relentless solution focus side.
The 1 inch better, 1 inch better, 1 inch better. I love that.
Exactly.
With one of the examples that you shared in the book, you also shared, and I love this as well. I did a podcast on this where when people give you passes, it keeps you on that problem side of the chalkboard. And I think it's episode 5 where I talk about everyone as a widow was handing me a pass. Like, oh, you don't need to do that. You have a problem. I'm going to affirm the problem that you have by giving you an okay to stay on that side. And that mentally keeps us on it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the person with the problem. It doesn't help any of us by accepting those passes that keep us on that problem side.
Yeah. It's kind of like how I love that. And it's kind of like what you said about Kai, the girl that we're talking about. I think it's chapter 4. She says in there, like, the only thing that really stung, you mentioned this, is when people would say to me, like, oh, I don't know how you do it. Or how do you do that? Like, I can't imagine going through that. Right. Because it's just, again, it's like telling her, like, your life must be so terrible. Yeah.
Yes. It hurts. It hurts deeply. And I mean, it's been 10 years since my husband died, but for 8 of those years when my boys were still young, constantly people were like, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. And it hurts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so telling us to make it 1 inch better. Like, I love that.
And your story, Dana, is such a testament that there are going to be things in life that we can't do anything about.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can't bring your husband back. Right. You know, and there's these things that happen in life. You know, it's like brutality of life is what it's called. Like these things, you know, like the big stuff, right? That we can't do anything about. And so RSF, Relentless Solution Focus, isn't going to take away your problems. You know, that's life. It's not going to take away your problems. But what it is going to do is it's going to allow you to better deal with the problems that are guaranteed in life. Now, there are going to be a lot of things that just don't seem to be as big of a deal, right? When you start adopting this relentless solution focus. So when I say it's not going to take away your problems, I guess that's maybe a little bit of a stretch. Like, I think it is going to take away a lot of your problems.
No,
like the little stuff that we don't even consider. Yeah,
but it helps you to show up better. And I think at one point in the book, you even say, like, you're gonna fail, but you're gonna fail better. Or you're gonna do something, but you're gonna do it better because you have applied a better mindset, better tools. And even if you don't get to the desired result, you're going to live happier and better because you spent less time on the left side, on the problem side
Totally.
of that chalkboard. And I love that. And I love sharing, like taking the pain that I had and saying, no, this is not going to bring my husband back. Like none of the things that I'm doing right now are going to raise a man from the dead. But helping myself and others step through the problems with better thinking, better problem solving skills, like are all, that's what it's all about.
Well, and Dana, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, the fact that you, I don't know if you know this about yourself. I think you do, but you have, I think, it's like anything else. We all have different levels of this stuff as our normal, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that I was very naturally high at this stuff. I think I was naturally this was hard for me, which is one of the reasons why I feel like I'm great at helping others through it, is because I've been there, but I think you are naturally a pretty optimistic person. And so I think your starting point is pretty dang high. And I know that's just kind of normal for you, but you've been dealt, a really tough hand. And what you've done with that is just incredible. You take, just the impact that you are able to have. And of course, no one would wish what happened to you on anyone. But the fact that you've taken that and made such an impact on so many people, just makes me want to cry,
Oh, you are so sweet.
That's
helping,
so incredible.
Helping to balance, manage cortisol was step one for me.
Yeah.
And and my listeners know, I have a favorite beverage that really I can attest to helped me just lowering the overwhelm so that I could lean in to, okay, what is this RSF method? What is the chalkboard? How can I apply this? Because I spent years in overwhelm saying, Ellen, that sounds great. I can't apply any of that. I can't even with where you're at. So if that is where you're at, if you're listening to the podcast, then lean in to the solutions that I share in the, cortisol response and all of the gut health things. But once we get to a place where we're sitting on the edge of our chair, ready to learn. I love you also shared in your book an example about you had a client that wanted to fire you, which I love. I love the full transparency in someone sitting in your office saying, okay, Ellen, I've hired you to be my high performance coach. And I want to get that to that next level in my career. Give me the 12-step process. And you're there's not a 12-step process. It's a lot of mental work and things that you need to do. And as you unpacked his habits, you were okay, tell me exactly what you do when you wake up in the morning. And he was well, first I pop a Xanax. And then I go into the office and I do these 7 things. And you were wait.
You just said it so casually, right? Yeah. It's just so normal. Again, it just feels so normal to us to be operating on these high levels of stress. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
So I love how you shared with him, hi, red flag. Hi, this is, I can't help you. We have to back up 4 steps. So can you share a little bit about that example of how you unpacked that red flag and helped him through that?
Yes. Well, and so, I love that example. It's funny. It's kind of been a while. I reference the book all the time, but it's when you mention these things, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I literally was oh my gosh, these mic drop, Ellen. There was you guys need to go get the book. I will link the book in the show notes for everyone listening. The book is absolutely amazing and filled with just real life examples of how you can apply these theories, this formula, the RSF formula, to everyday life. So back to the gentleman popping a Xanax.
Yes. Well, and so it's funny because when I guess what you would call me would be a performance coach, but I even hate that title because when I think performance coach, I just get this connotation. I just get this image in my mind of this muscly, huge guy on a stage with the Britney Spears mic, with the 12-step plan towards XYZ, right? And I'm not that, again, we focus on the research and what's effective and we know what's not effective, right? And so it's real life. I am a mom. I have had my own struggles. I'm not perfect at this.
Right.
But I know how to stay in the fight.
You admit in the book for a while that you were like, when you became a mom, or I don't know when it was, where you were like, I was not applying these tools to my own life because I'll be honest, I didn't want to. And like, that's a choice also, right?
Yeah. Well, and it was a time in my life, and I talk about this in the book. And in fact, this is a story in the book that our publicist, I told you about her a little bit, said, we got on a call with her one time, and we were like about to submit this draft, and she was like, Ellen, I don't know about that story. I don't know about you telling these people that you fell off track with this and that you've struggled with this.
You're like, that's reality.
Yeah. Well, and we hung up the phone, and Jason called me he called me right back. We hung up the phone with her. He called me right back. He was like, Ellen, we are not taking that out. He said, there is so much strength and vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And that was such a turning point. And I can't tell you how many people have reached out to us from reading this book and have said, like, I really resonated with that. And so I'll tell you kind of now, like, what we're talking about, what we're alluding to. So, this was right after I became a mom. So, maybe, I guess I'd be like 7-ish years ago. And I just really fallen off track. I really, your hormones are high.
I was just going to say, like, there's a couple, like, let's talk about, there's a couple of reasons. Like, you're tired, you just gave birth to another human being, your body is all over the place, like, yes.
And so I'd really fallen off track. I was teaching the stuff every day. I was coaching other people on it. And so I guess on some level, I kind of thought, well, it's getting in there. I'm teaching it. I'm talking about it. But I wasn't doing the training. And I'll teach you, we talked about that training. That's step 3 is the retrain. Well, I want to leave people with an aspect of that training too. But I wasn't doing the daily training. And here's the thing. Remember, our normal is PCT. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like you just flip the switch and you know this stuff and then it's easy to implement. This is why step 3 is so important. So step 1, recognize. Mm-hmm. Step 2, replace. Step 3, retrain. We have to do the daily training that's going to take advantage of our brain's neuroplasticity. Mm-hmm. We have this beautiful thing as humans called neuroplasticity, where we can literally shape and mold our brain through training. Mm-hmm. So we can literally change what becomes normal for us. Mm-hmm. And so I can say now that Relentless Solution Focus is my normal. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not times or periods I go through in my life where I really don't have to fight, right? Where I see myself slipping back over a little bit and I have to fight to kind of get back on track. But you're aware
and having the awareness, and really, if you're listening, like that's in my opinion, the biggest takeaway is having the awareness that you are on the problem side.
Yeah.
And of the mental chalkboard, and that you need to recognize, replace, and retrain to get to the other side. And I talk about habits all the time. I'm obsessed with habits. And this is just a mental habit.
It is. It absolutely is. And just like any other habit, it just takes time and consistency. It's all about the consistency. So there's a couple tools that are a really important part of this that we teach in the book, but I'm going to teach you one of them. It's called the success log. So this is one of the 2 things that we have our clients, our people do on a daily basis to really help make this relentless solution focus become your normal. And it's very simple. It takes like a minute on a daily basis to do. And it's just 3 questions. Well, there's a couple more than 3 questions that we have once you go through the whole thing in the book. But for our purposes, let's just do 3 questions.
Okay.
So write this down if you're listening to this. Write these 3 questions down because it's so simple. It's so impactful. And I see the effects of this with my clients every single day. Taking the 60 seconds to write down your answers to these 3 questions. So question number 1 is, what 3 things did I do well in the last 24 hours? It's really simple. What 3 things did I do well in the last 24 hours? That's question 1 on the success log.
I love it.
Here's the reason this is so important. And I can't believe I haven't said this yet because this is usually, I'm obnoxious about this, that self-confidence is the number 1 variable for all human performance. Self-confidence. It's number 1. It's been empirically studied. Nothing is going to impact the way that you're going to go perform in the world more than your self-confidence.
I love that.
And that perfectionist mentality, that problem-centric thought, keeps us focused on our mistakes and our shortcomings. And when we do something well, as perfectionists, right?
We negate it.
We totally negate it.
As a perfectionist,
Mm-hmm.
for any compliment that anyone would ever give me, I'm like, oh, I just do
Yes.
that. Or,
Yes.
you brush it off. And
Yes.
the older I get and the more I understand cortisol, our hormones, and like, we have conversations like this, the more aware I am of the fact that it's like, oh my gosh, that is my own lack of confidence, that I'm not even accepting a compliment because I'm focused on the problem. I'm focused on the 9 things that I'm not doing well.
Exactly.
That I can't accept the one thing that I am. So, okay, question number 1, what 3 things did we do well today?
Yep. And that's such a great example because, think about everybody listening to this. Think about the way that you accept a compliment. And we're taught to be humble, and so that kind of works against us in some way. It's like, oh, yeah, somebody tells you like, oh, I love your outfit. Oh, gosh, I've had this for forever. Like,
when you literally probably bought it yesterday, but you're like, oh, this whole thing, I take, and I don't. So what's the question? What's the second thing? What's the second question?
Number 2. So number 1, what 3 things did I do well today in the last 24 hours? Force your brain to focus on what you're doing well, because by default it doesn't want to. Now, number 2, what's one thing I want to improve in the next 24 hours? What's one thing I want to improve? Now, here's the thing. This RSF thing, this Relentless Solution Focus thing, isn't just all about like putting on rose-colored glasses and just ignoring the problems in your life. What it is about is recognizing when you're focused on it and get to work on the solution. Mm-hmm. Right? And so what our brains want to do is focus on where we're screwing up. What the second question in the success log, what's one thing I want to improve in the next 24 hours? What that question is doing is you're forcing your focus onto being relentless about making improvements, not perfection.
I love it. So what's the third question?
One thing I want to improve. And then number 3, what is one action step I can take that can help make that improvement? One action step. So we can't just identify what we want to improve. Most people are fairly good at knowing what they want to improve in their lives. Mm-hmm. But we need to take that next step to just identify what's one action step I can take that can help me make that improvement.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
What you're doing with the success log is you're training your brain on a daily basis that you pay attention. You pay attention to what you're doing well, and you keep your focus relentlessly on improvements, not perfection. Again, every single time you do your success log, it's like putting pennies into that piggy bank of your self-confidence and of that relentless solution focus mentality. But you've got to do the training. It can't just be a pep talk. You got to do the training. We walk you through another tool called the mental workout in the book. You kind of put together a really specific goal setting plan that's really important. But here's the thing. Don't worry about doing everything, right? Like, yes, do I want you to get the book? Absolutely. Like, I believe very strongly that it's going to make a significant impact in your life.
Yeah, the book is great.
Thank you. But I don't even want you to try to do everything. I want you to
start with the success log.
Yeah, start with the success log. Start with that RSF question, whatever resonates with you the most. That RSF question, that success log, just pick one thing and start implementing it. This is why we don't need the 12-step plan. We need the next one step. What's the next one thing?
If we go back to the example that you unpacked with the guy that was like, all right, I'm popping a Xanax, I'm sitting at my desk, I'm doing these 12 things, you basically backed him up to this. Let's go through this success log. And then I have to just give you a shout out because I was like giggling so hard in the book when you're like, this Xanax is a pacifier to your mind. Like you have to figure out the next step. And I was like, wow, I've never heard it stated that way. And I really I resonated with that. I was like, that's totally what it's doing. You are calming the storm.
Yes. But not making any changes in your life.
Right, but not making any changes in your life and not solving the problem. So all you're doing is kicking the can down the line.
Exactly.
To maybe solve it another day. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you for, an absolute another hour. So we'll definitely have to unpack the rest of the success plan or the next step on our next episode. But thank you so much for sharing all this. So many good nuggets, you guys. Dr. Ellen Reed, how can we find you? How can we follow you? What are our next steps for connecting?
Love it. So I'm on Instagram. It's just Dr. Ellen Reed, REED. And all my contact is on there. That's kind of where I put my focus is on Instagram. Our website is jasonselk.com. But I would start with Instagram just because that's kind of, I try to put some really helpful stuff on there too.
Oh yeah.
The book's on Amazon.
Yes.
Should be pretty easy to find us.
I will link all of the things in the show notes,
Okay,
you guys. So
awesome.
pop down there. I will put your Instagram. I will put the success log. So if you were driving or walking, like my favorite way to binge a podcast is to walk. So I definitely, if you don't have a pen, I will put all of these in the show notes. And yes, like I love it. Thank you so much, Ellen. This has been great.
Thank you.
Yes. Have a great day.
You too.